So I'm going to do another video. I'm going to tell you a little story. Um, encompass a case conceptualization. So my last one was, are we grooming girls to be toxic manipulators? Now, toxic manipulators is not like a manipulation of getting, like selling a car. You know, sometimes you have to manipulate some things to gain some other things. That's not the manipulation I'm talking about. Toxic manipulation is all about gaining a power and control. It's almost abuse tactics to dominate one over the other in the toxic manipulator's benefit. And it's always an attention seeking or a necessity seeking, and necessities are usually wants. Not all the time is it survival, because survival, our own genetics would probably kick in at that point. However, some has been used. So toxic manipulation to me is an abuser, but so often you see on social media this narcissism. Now, narcissistic personality disorder is extremely rare. It is a cluster B, and it's mostly dominated by the male. So when we say narcissism and narcissistic, we now have to look, and it actually coordinates, and it does an injustice to men, because it's probably 1% of the whole world population that could be diagnosed with narcissism. Narcissism has the number one key is, and I'll go over those, it is one characteristic that you don't find in anything else. So if that was the characteristic, nothing would get done in this world. And that is just not true, because we see things moving forward all the time. So let me tell you this little story. So 3 weeks ago, I ended up getting a client. Now, I work with the population. Granted, they're going out of their concrete thinkers. They're starting to become abstract right before their brain fully seals. They're between ages of 13. I do some 12-year-olds, but not as often. It depends on where they are cognitively, to 25, 30 years old. 30 years old, you're pretty well solidified on your thoughts, your perceptions. You can really pretty much critically think really well. And seeing other perspectives besides just yours. And that's concrete is all about you, self, how do you relate to the world, but it's all about my necessities and my needs. So when you transition into teen years, that's when you start learning it's not always about you. And a lot of people get stuck there because there's no guidance. And that's what I've noticed across, I do work in schools, and that's what I've noticed across the districts is they're either dismissed as you're just a child, still grow up, or be an adult, and then they get pocketed like that on a daily basis, act like an adult, but then they're not told how to, and they're not guided to. They're just castrated or yelled or demeaned in front of people, or then they're treated like a child, and then they get dismissed for being and punished for acting like a child. It's really quite inconsistent, which is more of a disorganized attachment style, but that's on another set. So I got this client 3 weeks ago. Come in, granted, still in high school, but legally after you turn, well, in this state, you can be 17 and drop out, and you're considered pretty much legally on your own. And you can seek advice, medical, and everything at 16. So I get this new client, female, African American. Race doesn't really play in a key factor, but it may, cultural. And so she came in, started processing that was a little bit more trauma, had exhibited, parents were divorced. Dad was a habitual, a chronic drug user, cocaine and crack, has been 9 months sober, was not ready or in a safe place right now to take her in. She wanted to go live with her dad, so she lives with her mother. Her brother had just gotten out of jail a year ago, and he is now living with dad in his recovery. Brother was identified as conduct disorder, lived with mom pretty much the whole time. She exhibited that she's expressed that in the last 2 years, her mom has forced her to go to church, that she needs to be saved. And every Sunday and 3 times during the week, she goes there. She says that there's a lot of verbal abuse, a lot of attacks. Mom's calls her fat, demeans her, makes her go to cheerleading, packs for her, tells her that she's going to go to hell if she doesn't do her prayers. Um, and then ignores her for days on end. And so I'm like, okay, well, I can understand that on some level, especially if you've, gotten out of a relationship with somebody that was an abuser. I can go off of some statistics that if you got out of a relationship with somebody that was a drug abuser, then he may have been physically or mentally abusive to you. And so then if that was when your children were still in the home, I can understand that they were also victimized, either physically or mentally done to them, or they experienced it vicariously through watching it being done to a loved one. And so we're starting doing an intake, not taking anything, little levels, moderate levels of anxiety, um, mild depressive episodes maybe, but I like to spend at least 4 or 5 sessions, good 2 hours of each session, to get a good idea of what I'm looking at before I get diagnostics, because I really don't, there's so many misdiagnoses. And when you're on medical, it's really quick. They want Medicaid. Most insurance wants diagnostics within like 2 sessions. That way they can bill it appropriately. And that if it's approved, so most people will give some kind of diagnostics. However, that diagnostic stays with this person forever. And so improper diagnostics happens on a repetitive basis. I mean, literally it happens so much. It really burns me, because these kids will come in and say, oh, I have ADHD. And I'll look and I'm like, how? Where? Oh, because I lost focus. I don't focus on my classwork. I'm like, really? I wouldn't focus either if I want to be out there playing and I never get to go outside because my parents put me on restriction because I have a B in math and I never get to go outside. I would be distracted too. Well, and then social media on my hands. I got my phone all the time. I lack focus. So my mom needs me to get some medication. Yeah. So that is the habitual use of it. And they want to say they do assessments and stuff, but people know how to malinger, and malingering is faking. Well, there it goes. So here goes the abuse of manipulation. It happens, and it's actually being increased. And our institutions do actually help people malinger, because if they want to get their addiction or their needs met, to give them a label, to give them a pass, then they need to manipulate the system. So this was experiencing some relationship issues. When I say relationship issues, is she's bisexual or lesbian. She's still trying. She's questioning. And she was telling me an experience that she had. She had gone out with a friend drinking. Of course, like we're a minor. So let's have that discussion at another time, because, of course, in therapy, sometimes they lead the sessions. And so she proceeded to tell me that she started drinking with a friend, went to go make a pass. They started making out, same sex. And that the next day kind of was weird because they had been friends for like 5 years. And she said that we were going to give it a try. We didn't know, because we didn't think that that was the way. She had expressed, I didn't think that my friend was that way. And I kind of liked it. And so I thought, well, let's give it a try for a couple weeks. And now I feel like it's only been 2 days and I can't handle it. I've got to have a relationship. So then we started processing her attachment style and what's feeding the drive to make it absolute now and not take our time and space, because they jumped from, and this is when the alcohol discussion came on, of losing your inhibition and not being able to problem solve, and that we do things impulsively, and then we have to backtrack and have to pay the consequences. But the consequences sometimes are something that you wouldn't have taken if you were in clear right mind. And now you have no other choice but to deal with it, because there's 2 parties in here. And that other party, she was expressing, that was not wanting to jump as fast. And I was like, well, you're going to have to take that as the other party saying no right now, slow down. Whether you want to or not, you have to respect those boundaries. And so then we started processing that. And it's not unusual for people that first come to me wanting to test me to see how often I'll be there or available when they deem is a crisis, because their crisis is always a crisis because they're managing their emotions like that. And to us, it's a little differently because your crisis is what we would triage as, is this an emergency vehicle? Is this a hospitalization choice? And then we triage it down from that way. But part of my interventions also, can you spend a few minutes by yourself? Can you process? What can you do to hold that off? Can you journal it? Can you do this? And that's actually therapeutic, but it gives me a good idea of where their headspace is when they're heightened in their mind at a crisis. So there has been 4 sessions from that episode to where we were, and I'm going to fast forward, make this a little cliff note, that this other party is not interested anymore, not wanting to talk. I guess that they had gone out and had a big argument at lunch, that this girl was being a shit talker, saying you're just nothing but a shit talker. I can't believe it. I mean, it went from this, I was 5 years friends, best friends. And then I don't even understand this whole, we track each other on Snapchat, and oh no, she's not even talking to me now, but I saw her rating on Instagram, I think it is, or Snapchat, one of those ones. Anyways, see, that's how I'm not that invested in this social media stuff. But this is, again, the teens say this is the podium I need to use to get the information out. Maybe somebody would understand what I'm talking about or can relate to what I'm telling you. And maybe I can help you. And so she expressed, and I'm going to call her the IP now because this is my identified patient. My IP of 3 weeks has expressed that this person, and I'm going to call her target, because later on I'll tell you it is a target, that my IP's target had a big dispute at lunch. And my IP was identifying the target as somebody that would talk shit, that wasn't very good in bed, that, I mean, she was throwing every character assassination down the tube on this target. And my question was, but did you not know this 5 years or 2 months or 6 months into your friendship? What was making it okay then if it's not okay now? Those are questions that I would be asking, because why all of a sudden the change? Because your attraction is not reflected or responded in the manner in which you want. So of course that's the discussion we ended up having too. She was not too keen. My IP was not too keen when I had to reverse it, going, but are you more disgruntled because they're not meeting up to your expectations? Because that is never going to happen in worlds. Nobody will ever meet up to your expectations because they're all different, right? You can put your hopes out there, but doesn't mean that. And later on, a few days later, sorry, this is where it got really bizarre. So like I said, I live in a big town, but apparently it's really a small town because the population that I work with, a lot I get by mouth and association, and teens don't know everyone. I'm just saying, teens know a lot of people. And so I hadn't seen one of my clients, which is the target, and I knew that this was the target. I had been working with this one for almost 3 years. And a lot of this one was sexual abuse. Well, was actually raped. And so then this one, we had been working with dialectical behavior, trauma bonding, how do we effectively communicate, distress tolerance skills. We had been going through some relationships, several relationships. Now, I have never known this one in 3 years to be questioning her sexual orientation. She has always been in relationships with men, and we've been through 2. And the most recent one is quite healthy because we've been working through a lot of the past trauma, so we wouldn't put what happened to her experiences and the boyfriend that she was with when she first got with me, the abusive relationships with that, mental, physical, and emotional. We didn't want to transfer it to another relationship. You never want to bring the past to another. So anyways, long story short, she comes in and I was like, I hadn't seen you in a bit. You've been, avoiding me. Are you okay? I felt like you were avoiding me. And she was like, well, I did, because I realized that, I was trying to deal with a situation that I was trying to use my skills. And I said, okay. I said, what's going on? Well, she expresses that she was drinking with a friend You hear where I'm going? And this friend made a pass at her. She didn't like it. So she told the friend I didn't like it. And in my head, I'm like, okay, it's not like this. She's a beautiful girl, drinking again. And I have to go, look, I get it. We're a teen and we want to go and be a rebel, but you know what happens when we drink. So I go to the psychological, cellular discussion that I do. And she was like, yes, I aware. And I'm totally like, I just can't do this. I can't hang out with my friends. And I was like, no, that's not what you should, do. Let's not go to that extreme. Anyways, so she starts expressing that, no, I said, no, I don't. I'm not interested in you that way. I'm not gay. Now I'm going, that's interesting. And then she says, and then just last week, there was something that had happened at lunch, and this girl started yelling at me. And I was like, okay, so how long have we been friends with this person? 5 years. Now, do you hear how I'm going with this story? So it becomes very apparent that I have two clients. We don't do dual relationships, but this has just become very challenging for me. Thank goodness I have interns, and I'm going to be able to shift the new one that I just got in to one of my interns, but to avoid the whole duality of relationships, and the ethicity, but also so we can work together to make sure that these are used. They can change some repetitive patterns that have been systemically brought on as their bags. And so she starts telling me that, no, I've told no since the beginning. And last week, she had mentioned that I usually bring her 1 day a week. I give her a ride. And this one, after this event, even after I told her, no, I don't like that. I don't go that way. Just things started being weird. She'd drop hints like, oh, well, give me a kiss goodbye as we were rolling down the hall. And I was like, what are you talking about? No. So then she goes, I went to her, she had to get her medication. She forgot it. So we went to her house. I got I went in to go to the bathroom. She went to go take her medication. I came out and she is stripped down butt naked saying, I'm going to change my clothes. Butt naked. She goes, I don't even know how you get back from that. That is like so weird. And I felt so dirty and so creepy. I felt violated. And I was like, look, girl, I got to go. I don't know what the hell you're doing. I said, no, that's ugh. And she said, I felt like she was just brushing me off. Anyways, so then lunchtime, she started cussing me out, saying that I was nothing but a shit talker. And I was like, oh my Lord, I've got two of the same. Except this is a great insight in my head. It went quick going, well, I get to see the perpetrator and the victim. I get to see both sides, and both of them are coming into me. Now, of course, my target, she has texts. Like, she literally has texts of saying, leave me alone. Don't do it. She's done amazing with her freaking boundary setting. Do not talk to me that way. I did not appreciate you calling me out saying I'm a shit talker. I've never been like that. I feel like you're gaslighting her. Or trauma bonding. You're dumping like all your trauma. I never even knew of this of you. 5 years. You weren't with your brother, so how did you get raped by him? Last year. He wasn't here. He was in prison. So I think you're making up some stuff to make it feel like I have to be under your control, and that I'm supposed to feel guilty because I'm saying no to you. I'm saying no because no means no. And I'm like, damn, girl, my target girl, you got it. That is exactly what you do. And of course, it shows me an insight that her abuse that was done to her, because she was raped, that she is not going to be the cycle of, she's not going to go back into that pattern. She's not going to be a victim, and she's not going to allow victimizations. She is standing firm. No, you do not talk to me. And she said, I was trying to do this and I have to dump it off. And I was like, absolutely. And how do you feel? And she's like, I'm really, really proud of myself, but I need to know a little bit more. And I was like, okay, so psychoeducation is something that I find that youth, our adolescents, really like. So I broke it down. And these are the cycle of abuse, which I go on a narcissism, and I do it for a reason. So you can see that the physical, there is the AB means the abuser's behavior, and V means the victim's behavior. But you can see a lot of similarities to what a intimate, violent, domestic violent abuser would do, but also what they identify as narcissism. There's a lot of similarities. So what I did was a lot of times the abusing abuser will label a victim, right? They will control a narrative. They will isolate. They will use tactics to increase discord between the target and others, and then make them feel like the only person that they have is the IP, my IP at this point, or the abuser. So neglect is in the same way. I will withhold food, um, finances. You can see that in emotional abusers. You power and control. That is what I'm talking about. When I talk about an abuser, I'm talking about a power and control. And we can see an increase when it comes to those that are sexually abused or domestic and violence. There's a high SIB, which is self-injurious behaviors. That could be eating disorders. That could be enuresis. I think it's enuresis and encropesis. So enuresis is urinating on themselves or bedwetting, and not a biological reason. Sometimes you can bedwet because your bladder is not as big. And then encopresis is where you have excrements. You take a poop and in random places or just out of fear. STDs, pregnancies can be all part of sexual or intimate violence. Bruises, fear, anxiety, panic disorders, phobias. Then also opposite polars. So they'll be able to become extremely clingy to the abuser, hoping. A lot of those that have been abused, it's a repetitive pattern, so they're repeating past patterns or expectations of being abused, and a lot of it's family systemic. So this is where people get really pissed. Most our children learn to be victims because our parents create them. Most of them. About 82% of all people that are victims can attribute this to a family dynamic. And it's a power and control. So when you talk about neglect, there's 3 different levels. Okay, so let's talk to the abuse. Physical abuse is all about physical power and control over physical abuse. That technically usually is dominating over one, thinking they're superior than the other. A lot of times you'd see it in a parent, but it could be a husband and wife. It could be a brother or sister. It could be a boyfriend or a girlfriend, a vice versa, girlfriend and a boyfriend. That is a higher level. Now we are seeing increasing where it used to be between 15 and 30-year-olds. Males were the higher levels of abusers. Now they are equalizing out. Our statistics are showing that there's pretty much equal, and maybe in some demographics, some states, women are more abusers than others. We also see higher levels of women on women same-sex abuse, which we've seen in males, but this is now higher because there's more of a power and control. I'm not for sure. More acceptability. When it comes to the physical part, the abuser usually has very strong characteristics. They'll label the victim as clumsy or an idiot or stupid. They can't explain the injuries. Oh, well, they're freaking dust dumb, right? They learn this discipline or this redirection tactics. Oh, well, they are kind of stupid. They need help. They need assistance. They become very clingy at times. But then the victim usually is very weary or overly clingy. They could be trying to fix everything. They could be hypervigilant, lack of sleep. They would not care about their hygiene unless the abuser was coming around. Repeated patterns. They would project their own. They would start hurting themselves, self-injurious behaviors. Cutting is usually the typical, but throwing up is another one. Maintaining control of something. Suicidal ideations. Not so often are they homicidal, except towards their abuser. Would they take out a gun or want to shoot and use this in bullying tactics? That the bullies, and then the one that was bullied is the one that attacks. And it's usually out of like, I have no other choice. They feel. Then you have the sexual abusers that usually the abusers' behaviors are usually they're fatigued because they've exhausted themselves out. They have overly favoritism towards their victim. They're quite clingy. They like repeating this pattern because it usually stems from them being sexually abused or watching sexual abuse going on. That is just as disastrous cognitively. They're really threatening. They're threatening to anybody, especially their victim, to keep control. The victim usually has suicidal ideation behaviors. They usually are injurious to themselves. They are high levels of anorexia and also encopecia. STDs can be prevalent, pregnancies, ripped or bleeding anuses if it's a man on man, or man on female that have, or they use objects. Eating disorders really high in those that are sexually abused, but also domestic violence. Age inappropriate behaviors are the key to when it's an adult on a child. Extremely inappropriate sexual behaviors. Fearful or overprotective of their perpetrators. This is where you get the Stockholm syndrome, where they're in love with their abuser. That can also be physical abuse, domestic violence, or even neglect. So they unconditional love, which unconditional, that's subjective, conditions to unconditional. And then you have neglect or emotional abusers. And those are where your abuser usually has mental illnesses of some sort, or they're depressed, they're substance abuse users. They use a power and control as well. Stress seems to increase their agitation and anger outbursts, but they also can be so tuned out and distanced, which you can see also when we look at detachments. But their victims are usually uh, failed to thrive when it comes to neglect. And usually minors are the ones that they don't learn to speak, they don't take care of themselves, they don't know how to, have proper hygiene. They don't even know what, I've had one that didn't even know what their period was and they started their period. They never had any kind of discussion with their parent of what that was. They were a firm believer that they were a guy. They didn't know that they could actually have periods. And when they did, that was life almost that almost killed that person mentally, physically, that life altering, but in the most disastrous way. Um, they can become very emaciated. They can starve themselves because they don't know how to take care of their needs. They become very drug addiction, and they actually end up being a victim because they don't know any better. They're looking for somebody to take care of them, and they don't even know themselves how to do any of it. Um, and a lot of them don't have adult supervision. Then you come to your domestic violence ones. And this, where your adult behaviors, they use huge intimidation. And you can see this on the power and control wheel. You can look them up anywhere. They use threatening behaviors. They threaten you, threaten people around you. But this is also sexual abusers will do the same. I'll kill your family, or I will make it worse for them, or I'll do to them what I'm doing to you. They'll actually use financial abuse. They'll isolate. They like to isolate you because they isolate you. You don't have no support. You have nobody come. And most of the times you can see this when they've had somebody that's super outgoing, then all of a sudden they stop talking and they don't go out anywhere and they only go out with one person. When you see them out, it's usually only with one person. It's usually their significant other or partner or identified best bud. They use physical aggression towards their victim. They are overly demanding. You'll see an energy shift in them. They're angry. They're overly chatty with everyone else. They like to control a narrative. They're also very dismissive of the victim. They will do whatever they can to character assassinate, gaslight. They love to point out flaws of their victim to everyone else and remind the victim of only they like them, that nobody else actually would accept them. Then the victim actually, their behavior starts becoming, they isolate themselves out of shame. They think that everything is true. They're fearful of others' response to them, but they're fearful of losing the abuser. Because they have nobody else. They actually fully believe this. They are usually with bruises, and so they're hiding because they're embarrassed. They're overly attentive to avoid being punished because they believe that they've done wrong. They use suicidal ideations a lot, so they are one that would probably more likely commit suicide. They usually abuse substances either to be included with the abuser because the abusers have, I mean, there's usually alcoholics that are involved in it. This usually leads to sexual financial. So it's like a door to opening. They're super friendly. The abuser's super charismatic at the beginning to elicit you to come in. And then when the mask starts falling off, and usually that's about 6 months. If you're looking for it, you should know the cues and the red flags within 6 months. Not everybody. So you really should, if you're going to get in a relationship, I always say you should, if you're in it for more than 3 months, then maybe you should think about sinking some therapy with a marriage and family therapist just to kind of navigate if this is worth continuing on and investing in furthering a commitment, or if we should better be bygones be bygones. The loss of a relationship, also the victim would lose all relationships and contact with other people. So then they would definitely be isolated, and they'd be reminded that they were isolated. They seem to be overly kind to the perpetrator and then fearful within a second later, or they're extremely silent and then they go incognito. Those are all a part of the domestic. So domestics use means to dominate a partner or potential partners, friends. I'm finding it, and this is where I'm going, is with my population, I'm finding this is happening within friend pockets, dominating friends. Girls on top are dominating other girls. This is toxic manipulation, and they're dominating it for a potential mate. And the mates are not just other men; they're other girls. Or you can't be friends with that one, because they're also sexual abuse. Is fatigue, hypersexual, somatic thoughts of I'm not pretty without them. Physical is inflicting injury. So domestic also usually has this involved in it, but domestics in the friend pocket is having some physical, but neglect. I'm going to neglect you. I'm going to, they know where you are. Your Snapchat tells them where you are. They got locations on each other. They are literally locating you. And so when you look at this, I thought, well, y'all probably would like to see. I did a list of what's difference between narcissists. And this is what I've been doing with some of my clients, because this is becoming a pattern. This is what a narcissist is, and this is what an abuser. Typical cues. These are red flags. And if you notice, the ones that are in the red are the same. The ones that are in black are something that is just unique to abusers. Narcissists usually don't, but they don't really freaking care. So when we talk about narcissism typically is 1% of the population. They're usually male. I don't know very many that are female. And when I say 1% of the globe, not America. Okay. So 1%, and it's usually male. White males are usually the ones that are narcissism, but abusers are pretty much, you got one in every family. That's how I'm going to put it. So narcissists, number one, you could tell a narcissist from anyone else is they are grandiose. There is nothing that you're going to tell them that is negative about them that they are going to believe. And you can actually see it on their face that they are not going off into thinking about it. They're not mulling it over. They absolutely know for a fact that they are perfect. That's the grandiose. That's the delusion. That is the key that you know that you're dealing with a narcissist. You're not dealing with an abuser, and I very rarely run into those. Number two is self-centered. They are self-centered. Well, so is an abuser. They're quite self-centered. They have no empathy for their victims. They have no empathy for anybody else. They just want what they want. But abusers, their number one is they yell and they intimidate. They yell, they intimidate, they try to control the narratives. The number three, you can see, they're the same. Dominate conversations. They love to control the narratives. Their self. They dominate the control. With narcissists, of course they want to do that because they want it all about them. The conversation should be shifted to them. Abuser is a conversation needs to be shifted that my victim is a piece of trash, and I am the only one that is worthy to stay around because I have subjected myself to make sure that I'm the holiest, to make sure I'm there to help my victim. That's the difference between the dominating the narratives. But the narratives here is, how do I isolate you to let the others know just how horrible you are so I can keep you under my whim. This is not to dominate others' perceptions of They're victims. They just want to dominate others' perceptions of how great they are. Then number 4 is present alluring or charming. They can be. Both abusers and narcissists are very alluring, very charming. They're very interactive. They are great communicators at the beginning, except one of the masks fall off after so many months. Sometimes it could take up to 2 years. That's why they always say 2-year frames. The first year you really can see it. A narcissist, theirs never come off. Their masks never come off. Number 5 is very jealous, envious of others that get attention. Now here, abusers get jealous too, and they get very envious. Now there's a difference. Jealousy is all about, I want what they have, right? Envious is the same way, except envious is I'm going to take it. That's mine. Jealous is I want what they have. Envious is I'm going to get it. This is for attention. And this is if my victim gets attention. Bullshit. That's the difference. So a narcissist is if anyone gets attention and they don't. Abuser is I get very jealous and envious if my victim gets any kind of special treatment. Only I deem how much they get. So the abuser dictates if their victim gets a reward. The narcissist says nobody gets a reward except for me. Never take ownership of their self, behaviors, or words. It's the same thing, right? They'll never take responsibility, right? This is unreliable for control, right? They are unreliable and they won't take responsibility because they want to maintain control. They'll do it this time if they feel it, but it's more of it's a consequence to the victim. It's a consequence for the victim if I'm going to be responsible today. And if I'm not being responsible today, and that's how the abuser looks at it, then you're going to get punished. This one is I don't take ownership of anything unless I am perfect, unless the narrative says that I'm good and that I am this godlike mentality. I will never take ownership. Don't matter. It's always blaming something else. This is blame others. This is blame my victim. Extremely impulsive for quick gratification. Both of them are impulsive for gratification. So the difference is narcissistic is impulse for quick gratification. That's usually sex. And so they're quick to ejaculate or get their rocks off. And that's impulse. So they usually are revolving in relationships, and it's usually 1-night stands or 2-month stands, whatever. But here, impulsive for gratification, this is a release of anger as well as a sexual fix. So it's not just getting 1-night stands or sexual gratification. It's also the release of a high tension. So if I'm extremely stressed, I'm going to take it out. And it's usually not, it's the happy is the sex release. The anger is the beating. It's always usually a happy release. It's usually sexual. Then anger, violent outburst would be if the other narratives were looking at not him. And it's usually a male that's a narcissist. So the anger outburst would only be if nobody was looking at them and they weren't getting attention. This is the angry outburst of violence is if anyone was giving anybody else an attention, but I'm just angry because I can't handle my stress. This angry outburst is because they can't have stress. And that's how an abuser looks. But it's the same. Do you see how they're quite similar? Except you need to know each individual. And most people on TikTok or Snapchat or their little like YouTube little motivational videos don't show exactly the criteria of each one because they're both the same, except this one has a different set. This is lack of stress, emotional regulating and stress management. And this is all about me. I'm throwing a tantrum. Nobody's looking at me. I'm mad now, right? 9 is high presence of entitlement. This one, they feel I'm entitled. I need the attention. The spotlight needs to be on me. This entitled behavior is, it was done to me. I freaking survived. I deserve to be treated with respect. And if not, I'm going to take it out on all of you. Okay, so that entitlement is a little different. It's owed to me. This one is I was born to be. I was born to be. It's owed. There's a difference. This one's going out to get retribution. This one is, it should be right here. Both of them gaslight. If you can see number 10 here and number 14 here. However, you can see there's 3 other components an abuser will do that are not in narcissism. Isolate. The abuser will isolate you. Narcissists don't fucking care. That's the difference. They don't care. Fine, go. I am a god. How dare you? Physical and sexual abuse also encompasses an abuser. If you're a mental or an emotional abuse, being abused by emotional abusers, those are the ones. They will usually one-up it, and they'll either convert it to physical or sexual assault. Substance abuse usually is encompassed in this, especially abusers. Either the victim will have to use just to cope with life, or the abuser is the abuser because they can't cope with life and they're using. And both of them gaslight. Gaslight's all about telling a story, starting a fight. This one's starting a fight for control. This one's starting a fight to dismiss. And then constant contact with the victim. Both of them have to. So narcissists constantly have to have a contact with the victims or the people around them, because they need to make sure that they still view that person as God or this great grandiose person, and it's more of self-inflating. So they got to constantly do that for control, because they need to have that feeling that, oh yes, they're still fawning all over me. This one is more of, do I still have control over you, and how many times do I have to touch in with you? And that's what gets to number 16. Is they constantly touch in. The abuser will constantly touch into their victim to make sure, do I still have control over you? How much control do I have? And how long can I go in between before I have to go back and touch in with you, before you start controlling yourself by what I've done? So basically, these are two that need each other. So an abuser will do the control touch in, because they're hoping at some point that they have trained their victim to maintain control while the perpetrator or the abuser is away. So then the perpetrator can go off to find another victim, but this one will still be maintained. And that's why repetitive abuse victims have the trauma, and it lasts decades on into another relationships, is because the perpetrator has trained you to be your own abuser. And that's the difference. And so then you have your narcissism, which narcissism can suddenly detach. They have no freaking problem walking away. An abuser do, because this is a power and control. They cannot stand that you are walking away from them, because then they can't discipline you. And then, of course, a narcissist is unreliable. They'll walk away in a heartbeat, and no, I want to call it no shits in a handbag. They'll walk and not break a stride. They'll find another pocket, because that's how grandiose they are. They don't think that that's a big issue at all. Now, the abuser, and that's where it comes to where I was super proud of my team that had come out of an abuse and trauma, and then got enlisted into this new girl and put up her boundaries, and was not going to allow herself to get re-victimized. She broke the chain from her abuser. She broke the chain. So when we talk about narcissism, we talk about abuse, and the work that I do with these kids is, are we grooming our kids to give them a pass saying it's narcissism, but they're actually abusers? And are we increasing our girls to be abusers because we so often want to dismiss it as, oh, narcissism is just males. It's not women. Girls don't do that. I am proud of the feminist movement way back to give us the right to vote and to give us a voice. But I am not proud if it leads us to dismissing the value of men, but also to give a pass to allow women to continually beat, dismiss, isolate, gaslight, and change the narrative because they're jealous, envious, as a power and control to abuse not just women, other women, but men and children. It's our duty. So if any of my children that are watching this, and adults or whoever, please educate yourself. And no, you can say no. No means no. Stop means stop. You don't owe them anything. And don't allow yourself to get into a position where they don't need to know where your GPS is. They're friends. What does that have to do with it? It's not an emergency. Like, emergency vehicles need your location on. I don't understand any of that. And why do you need why do they need to be tracking your how many times you're on Snapchat, or what is your rating? Like, that's obsessive on their problem. That's not yours. That's theirs, and they need help with it. If they have to track how often you're on that, um, don't they have better things to do? And if they don't you? And wouldn't you want to do that? Because if that's their whole world, imagine you being stuck in a box. Because that's exactly where you'd be, and you don't have to. No means no. Those are red flags. Okay? Um, if you find that you may be in a domestic violence or an abuse cycle, or you're not sure, this is what I say, even if you're not sure, go to either a school counselor or go to your local hospital. Call your local mental health facility. 741-741 is the national number that you can call. 411 is another one, and they can give you some, even if it's a suicide hotline. I think 187-187 is another one, and you can ask them for some more further advice or locations. If you feel like you would like to get something personal or advice from me, please email me. My email is going to be down in the description. I do take, on personal notes, I do take some private sessions with teens. Of course, I prorate it because, of course, I have to make my bills, but I really make it feasible for teens. And I work with them on a regular basis. Take what you can from here, further your knowledge, because the one thing people can't take from you is knowledge. And you give it away willingly. So if you want some more advice and you want to hear a little bit further into this, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or reach out to another professional, social worker. Well, they usually get involved in a little deeper, but a therapist, mental health facilities, doctors will help you. Thanks for listening. And once again, take care of yourself, take care of each other. Have a blessed day.